Welcome to the Scottsdale Planning Commission public hearing. The city encourages your interest and participation in the public hearing process. The Planning Commission is an advisory board to the City Council on land use and zoning matters. The meeting agenda items are development applications that require public hearings. The Planning Commission considers the request and makes a recommendation for approval or denial to the City Council. The City Council makes the final decision for or against approval of the application. The agenda consists of the roll call, minutes approval for the prior meeting, continuances are for items that will not be heard tonight, withdrawals are for items that have been withdrawn from any further consideration. Consent agenda is for items not likely to require a presentation or discussion. All items on the consent agenda may be voted on together. Any commissioner may move any item from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. The regular agenda is where each item includes a presentation and recommendation by staff, a presentation by the applicant, and public testimony. The applicant has the opportunity to respond to the public testimony. The Planning Commission then discusses the case and votes. Non-action is for items for discussion, and no vote will be made by the Planning Commission. Citizens wishing to speak on any agenda item must have submitted public comments or request to speak form no later than 90 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Those wishing to speak in person must fill out a blue speaker card, or if not willing to speak, may fill out a yellow comment card and turn it in at the staff table before the agenda item is to be discussed. The chair will call you by name when it is your turn to speak. When called, come to the podium if attending in person, or press the *6 button if calling in. State your name and address and then begin speaking. Groups wishing to speak should elect a spokesperson to represent the views of the group. Your comment will be limited to 3 minutes for individual speakers, 1 additional minute for each additional individual present at the meeting who has contributed their time to a representative speaker, up to 10 minutes. Please format your speech to be accommodated within the applicable time frame given. For convenience in timing presentations for those attending in person, a light system is installed on the podium. The light will be green for 2 minutes and yellow for 1 minute. Please conclude your comments when the red light appears. If speaking remotely, the chair will indicate when your time is up. Those remotely attending this meeting shall observe the same rules of order and decorum as if they were physically in attendance inside City Hall. Thank you for your interest and time, and now we'll begin the meeting with roll call.
Chair Higgs.
Present.
Vice Chair Young.
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Present.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Here.
Commissioner Ertel.
Here.
Commissioner Scarborough.
Here.
Commissioner Serena.
Here.
All present, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to public comment for non-agenda items. Those are the yellow cards. It does not look like we have any that have been submitted, only blue cards. Correct? Okay. So with that, then, we'll move on to the administrative report. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Just really quickly, I want to draw your attention for additional comments that are in front of you for item number 3. Some of these you may have already seen before, but they're all since the packet went out last week. And so there's a new petition, looks like that's in support, a couple other supporting comment letters, and then comments with some concerns about noise. And there are probably going to be some speakers on item number 3 this evening. And then lastly, I just want to remind you that our next meeting will be on September 27th. So for your calendars, thank you.
Great. Okay, with that, we will move on to the approval of the regular minutes, meeting minutes from August 23rd.
Chair Higgs, I move for approval of the August 23rd, 2023 regular meeting minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Vice Chair Young and a second from Commissioner Scarborough. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Higgs.
Yes.
Vice Chair Young.
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
Yes.
Commissioner Ertel.
Yes.
Commissioner Scarborough.
Yes.
Commissioner Serena.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our action items, starting with the consent agenda. We have one consent agenda item that it looks like we are going to, not going to move to regular. We're talking about potentially moving to regular agenda. It looks like we're going to keep on consent, and we don't have any recusals this evening. So with that, can I get a motion for agenda item number 25UP 2022 lifted trucks?
Go ahead and make a motion. I'll move to make a recommendation to City Council for approval of Case 5 UP 2022 per the staff recommended stipulations based upon the finding that the conditional use permit criteria have been met.
We have a motion from Commissioner Scarborough and a second.
Second.
And a second from Commissioner Ertel. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Higgs,
Yes.
Vice Chair Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Ertel,
Yes.
Commissioner Scarborough,
Yes.
Commissioner Serena.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Very good. With that, we will move to our next agenda item, which is number 3, 2ZN 2023 SWAGs. We have a presentation from staff, Mr. Brian Clough.
Good evening, and thank you, Chair Higgs, Vice Chair Young, and Planning Commissioners. I'm Brian Clough with the city's current planning department, and I'll give you a brief presentation, overview of the request for SWAGs 2ZN 2023. So the specific request this evening is a zoning district map amendment. The applicant's asking for your recommendation to the City Council for a change in the zoning from C2 P3, which is our central business commercial district with parking overlay in the downtown overlay, to downtown with our downtown multiple use subdistrict in the type 3, and they're carrying over, requesting to carry over the P3 and the DO overlays to the current zoning as well. There are also amended development standards for consideration. It is on a relatively small parcel of 0.29 gross acres. The site's located, highlighted in yellow here within our entertainment district, kind of on the south edge there, south of Camelback Road and east of Scottsdale Road. Here's a closer look at the site. It is a corner parcel at the intersection of Schumann Lane and Wells Fargo Avenue. You can see there's an existing building there that historically has functioned as a restaurant and bar. It's a single-story building that will be demolished for the reinvestment in the property for the proposed new building. The existing zoning designation, as I stated before, with the C2 P3 DO, and the requested zoning with the downtown multiple use type 3, P3 and DO carrying over. The site is within our Old Town Character Area Plan, identified there in the upper right-hand corner. A little bit zoomed in, and with the Old Town Land Use Plan overlaid on there, you can see the site is within the downtown multiple use land use designation of our Old Town, consistent with the requested district. And the Old Town development types showing within the purple area, which is the type 3, which is the area of our Old Town that allows the highest intensity of development with regard to density, floor area, and building height. The proposed development includes demolition of the existing building for construction of a new restaurant building. This is the proposed site plan here. Part of the improvements associated with it will be constructing new sidewalks around the perimeters. They will be going in it with a 10-foot wide width. It's a highly pedestrian-oriented area, so the increased width in sidewalks will help out with the pedestrian circulation there. You can see there's a bulb out being added to the corner there, which would also provide some extra pedestrian protection and circulation area. The proposed building is just over 9,000 square feet of floor area, and it is 3 stories. There's two physical interior levels with a roof deck, the third level being a roof deck that also has a cover over it. There were some questions regarding the parking and where the on-site parking spaces are located, so I just wanted to point that out here. This area in red that's highlighted, there are on-site parking spaces there that are tucked under the Galleria parking garage. There's 12 spaces there. This owner has rights to 8 of those parking spaces, so those are the 8 on-site parking spaces that are being provided with the development. A quick look at the floor plan. This is the ground floor plan. It is a restaurant use. There's not furniture shown on the plan. You can see a bar centrally located and a lounge area around it. To the right-hand side, which is the east, is an outdoor patio area that is within city right-of-way. The current property has a lease with the city to utilize that area for an outdoor patio, and this owner proposes to continue use of that through extension of the existing lease to use the patio. Here's a look at the second floor area, similar to the first, open dining area and a bar located in the middle. Going back to the first floor, the left-hand side would be the kitchen area. I just wanted to specify the kitchen location. The second floor, you can see the restrooms, dining area, and then the third floor, which would be the rooftop dining area, you can see here, and with additional restrooms provided. These are the conceptual building elevations. This is a zoning request, so we're not stipulating to specific design or building elevations, but this gives you an idea of the mass and the potential character of the proposed building. A quick summary of some of the project information. As I mentioned, it's about 9,100 square feet of floor area. The proposed building height is 58 feet 6 inches. That's to the highest point, including mechanical equipment. This zoning district within the Type 3 area would allow 84 feet of height at the location. Parking required is 30.52 parking spaces, and the applicant's proposing to provide that through 8 on-site parking spaces, 18.5 P3 parking credits, which currently exist on the property through the P3 overlay that was entitled previously. And then for the balance, 4.02 in lieu parking spaces for the total of 30.52 spaces. As I mentioned, there are amended development standards requesting as part of the application. The downtown district does allow the city council to grant amended standards for building setbacks and stepbacks for small parcels in our downtown. A small parcel is defined as parcels that are less than 20,000 square feet, and this meets that criteria, and the applicant is requesting relief on building setbacks, building location, and building stepbacks to allow for redevelopment of the property. The first request relating to setbacks, this graphic illustrates here, the red line would be the typically required setback from the curb in our downtown district. It's 20 feet. The applicant's proposing to reduce that to 13 feet 7 inches, which is the blue line, and where the edge of the building is proposed. This is only for the Schumann Lane frontage. And the Wells Fargo meets the 20-foot requirement. The 13-foot 7 on the north side is in line with the existing building frontage to the west, and is generally also in line with the buildings to the east on the other side of North Wells Fargo. So they're maintaining a consistent setback with the existing buildings. Part 2 of the request would be for the step back. So the step back would be controlling the mass of the building. As the building increases in height, the step back would require certain portions of the building to be set back further than the lower portions. So on the left, this is a cross-section through the building showing the Schumann Lane street frontage on the right-hand side of that exhibit. And the red dashed line, if you can see that, is illustrating what the typical step back requirement would be, and the blue would be the requested. So this blue is in line with the requested 13-foot 7 setback, and is proposing to increase the point where the building would start to step back from 45 feet to about 54 feet, where that building would start stepping back. On the right-hand side of the screen would be the Wells Fargo frontage and the typical requirement identified in red there, and the building does comply with that requirement without amendment. To recap, Mr. Curtis mentioned that we did receive some additional public comment on the proposal. We did receive one comment in opposition, expressing concerns regarding noise, as well as parking requirements. I'll note that there are stipulations already included in the packet that are intended to address noise concerns, limiting to a decibel level as well as limiting locations and directions of any external speakers that may be located in the building. There's also been 2 other comments received in support, which have been provided to you, as well as the petition that includes 19 signatures in support. Just to summarize again the action requested with the zoning district map amendment from C2 P3DO to downtown multiple use type 3 with the P3DO and the amended standards. That concludes staff's presentation. Happy to answer any questions, and the applicant's also here with the presentation prepared.
Thank you, Mr. Clough. I guess I'll ask a quick question of you, since you referenced external speakers in my conversations prior to the meeting and getting more information on this case. I was told that there are no speakers externally, at least on the rooftop area. Can you clarify?
Yes, Chair Higgs and members of the commission, staff agrees that there are no external speakers proposed at this time.
Okay.
Staff's just trying to be a little bit more sensitive to the area and possible future noise concerns based on land uses in the surrounding area. So this would provide some enforcement of potential future speakers if those were to be installed at any time.
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Kaminsky, clarification?
Yeah, clarification, please. So their plan does not show outside speakers. You have a condition of approval that prohibits speakers outside?
Chair Higgs, Commissioner Kaminsky, it's not a prohibition on speakers. It is similar to language that we use in other projects that are proposing external speakers, which limit the location and direction of the speakers to be oriented interior to the establishment. Directed downward and oriented interior.
Okay.
Vice Chair Young.
Yeah, I have a question about that. So I thought I read somewhere in the application that they were limiting the loudness of the speakers to 68 decibels. Did I read that right?
Chair Higgs, Vice Chair Young, the stipulation that we have drafted in the stipulations regarding noise references the city's noise ordinance as well as a 68 decibel level. The 68 decibels would be measured from across the street of either Wells Fargo or Schumann. It's intended to protect noise to the neighboring properties. So it would be measured across the street. So it wouldn't actually be the decibel level at the speaker. It would be across the street. The 68 decibel number comes from our noise ordinance, which is already part of the city code, but is not applicable within our downtown area. So this allows a similar noise compliance measure to be enforced within the downtown area.
Okay, so they, under that requirement, they would, or provision, they would be allowed to have amplified sound inside the restaurant up to 68 decibels, nothing outside.
Correct.
That's being proposed.
Correct. They would be able to have internal speakers, and any noise that were to escape the restaurant would not be able to exceed 68 decibel levels measured from the east side of Wells Fargo or the north side of Schumann.
Okay. I mean, and maybe you don't know, what is 68 decibels equivalent to?
I don't know that I could point out a specific sound that would be equivalent to 68 decibels, but my understanding is that number, when they were working through the noise ordinance, was arrived at as a typical ambient noise level of an urban area.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. Mr. Clough, I guess probably the most important part was to remember that when we received, and DR has also received these type of applications, one of the most important parts about having an outside application, such as what they're desiring here, is usually found to be like they've had mitigating circumstances to applied to them as far as keeping the level of sound down, such as hard surfaces being mellowed out by softer interiors or exteriors, barrier walls that, reach above the parapet. Now, because there's no design features here and no real renderings showing that third level, we really don't know what that third level looks like or can really achieve. And one of the things was important was, like I said, that barrier where they raised the barriers up to like 4 or 5 feet so that any noise that's generated, even by the people utilizing the top, actually it stayed within the general area and it didn't overlap some of the noise level onto the rest of the street. I went over to the facility today in the general direction of that, and I was just amazed at what's going on down there. It's unbelievable, the impact, the street mitigation, everything else that's going on there. I can only have empathy for anybody trying to build something down there right now. We all know that traffic is just unbelievable, and the development in that area with the hotels and everything is going to be something more than we probably even realized when they passed a lot of these things 5 years ago. So I would, anticipate something of a construction mitigation scheme being brought forward at some time when they bring it forward to DER or something like that. And if we can see any kind of a preemptive way, we can see some renderings or anything in anticipation of other things, would probably go a long way in trying to resolve any kind of public opinion or any negative factoring going on. So at that point, I'll finish up. Thank you.
Commissioner Kaminsky.
I wanted to follow up with the noise concern, and I don't know whether, and this is kind of design related, the orientation of where the restrooms on the 3rd floor could be placed on the north side along Schumann so that any sound from that 3rd floor outdoor space would be, forcibly away from the hotel on the other side of the street. I guess one of my concerns is enforceability long-term. So we have an application here that has no speakers shown on the outside. That could change at any time. It's allowed by the condition that they could add speakers. They can be oriented in a certain way. A new tenant moves in, those speakers get changed out, things change over time, and now you have more similar uses in the area, which over time create an area that's very hard to enforce. The cacophony of sound from different places and pointing of fingers of who's creating the decibel level, I guess, would be a concern that I had. If it was able to be mitigated through design from the beginning, then we wouldn't have to have a stipulation that prohibited outdoor speakers. But the way it's written now, it kind of leaves it open to future modifications. So.
Did you want to respond to that?
Sure, I
Mr.
wasn't sure if you were looking for a response or not, but I can certainly reply, Chair Higgs and Commissioner Kaminsky. I think you do bring up some valid concerns. We're looking at this as a preventative measure to help us with further reviews, such as a development review board application, in which case, when that does come forward and we're looking at the building design, we do have the opportunity to look at the floor plan and see what kind of mitigation measures may be imposed on the building during that process. And the speaker stipulation is just another tool that we have to help orient speakers if they are proposed with a development review board application or a future tenant improvement or anything like that.
Commissioner Ertel.
Thank you, Chair. There are 30 parking spaces, 30.52 or whatever it was, parking spaces required and provided. But looking at the facility itself, clearly there's the capacity to be a lot more parking demand than what would be accommodated by 30.52 spaces. Understood, they don't have to provide any more. But is there additional parking, or I should say, how much additional parking is there available in the public garage? I mean, how full does that get? Do we monitor that? Do we, other places, is there going to be space for additional parking. I mean, we don't know how much parking is going to be demanded because we don't know exactly how many seats there are going to be here. It could be 250, something like that. You know, how many people are going to come from, you know, walk in as opposed to drive in? How many do ride share? We don't know that. But I think it's, at least to me, it seems like there's going to be a greater demand for parking than 30.52 spaces. Can you tell me what availability is like in the area?
Chair Higgs, Commissioner Ertel, it is a rather unique area of the downtown where this is located in the entertainment district. Obviously, it's a much more pedestrian-oriented area. We would anticipate that there would be less folks using vehicles to arrive at the establishment and relying more on ride share and walking. There are, you know, apartments, hotels, and other uses nearby that may draw patrons. But specifically regarding a parking availability in the area, there is, just in parking garages, the nearest public parking is the Galleria garage. There's also a surface lot next to the Galleria garage and a couple other city-owned surface parking lots that have about 572 parking spaces in that quadrant of the downtown area. With the walkability, we do expect that those spaces will be accessible for this use as well as other uses in the entertainment district. Additionally to those structures and surface lots, there is quite a bit of on-street parking in the area, which does tie back into that P3 parking credit. Those are intended to work in tandem with each other. When the properties were entitled with the P3 credits, that was in tandem with the on-street parking. So the on-street parking was intended to serve those properties with the P3 credits. So I don't know the exact number of on-street spaces in the area, but there's hundreds of on-street in the quadrant, and I mean there's over 2,300 spaces in all of downtown. But we do anticipate that the parking supply in the area will be able to handle the demand.
Okay, I understand there's a lot of potential spaces, but how full does the parking get? I mean, I don't get down there at night. I don't know. You know, is it packed out? Are there spaces available?
I don't have occupancy numbers on parking spaces. I'm not aware of any counts that the city's done to check occupancy of the public parking in the area, you know, on the weekends and nights when there would be highest use.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Scarborough.
Thank you, Chair Higgs. Mr. Clough, just out of curiosity, if I look at an aerial or I drive in this area, it looks to me that there's 3 parallel parks along Schumann and one along North Wells, Fargo Ave. Is that the case still with this application? Based on site plans, it's sort of hard to see that, but are we losing 4 parallel parks as part of this application?
If we could bring the presentation back up, I might be able to go back to the site plan. I don't believe we're losing any spaces.
Okay.
The existing space that's on Wells Fargo adjacent to the site, my understanding is that's already a loading zone. That's remaining, and I don't think we're losing any spaces.
So the 3 on Schumann are going to exist after this?
Right, those 3 are remaining, correct.
Okay. My other question goes back to noise. If we're putting the stipulation in to help give the city some teeth, if you will, in terms of the external speakers, why not just prohibit them instead of suggesting that they face down and inward? Why stop there? From the city's perspective.
Chair Higgs, Commissioner Scarborough, as I mentioned before, this is more of a preventative measure for possible future enforcement of other land uses that may come through. If, you know, for example, a future owner comes through and tries to get a conditional use permit for a bar or some other use. With regard to prohibition of the speakers, I'm going to verify the language really quick.
Yeah, my only point is that would also be preventative. It would just be more of an extreme preventative than what's being proposed now. So I totally understand your perspective on trying to be preventative. I'm just curious why'd you stop there and not just prohibit as a preventative measure?
So if a more intensive more noise-intensive use came forward in the future, they would be subject to a conditional use permit, and then we would have another opportunity to stipulate further. But this language that we have here is also consistent with other uses in the entertainment district that did go through the conditional use permit process. So we're having consistency with other projects in the area and didn't intend to further restrict this property than those other uses in the area that have a conditional use permit already.
Thank you, Mr. Clough. That's all I have for right now.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yes, sir. Can you explain to me, on the Galleria parking lot, that's obviously the largest parking area, part of that area. Is that for public use?
Chair Higgs, Commissioner Gonzalez, it is a private garage, but the city does have an agreement with the owner for public parking spaces within that garage. So to just give you a summary, there's 127 spaces within the garage that are 24-hour-a-day public parking, and then there's an additional 200 spaces added to that 127 for nights and weekends. So during the night and weekends when the demand is higher in the area, there's 327 public spaces available in the Galleria garage.
That agreement that was done with the city, I think, is there an example of what timing is the contract for that? Because I don't think it was in perpetuity. I mean, in perpetual type of thing. It was a year-by-year renewal.
Chair Higgs, Commissioner Gonzalez, I do believe it's perpetual unless the city and the owner were to renegotiate in the future.
Thank you.
Commissioner Serena, did you have anything for Mr. Clough before we move to the applicant?
No, I'll save my questions till after the applicant presents.
Okay, fantastic. Commissioner Ertel.
If I could just follow up, and this is probably beating a dead horse. You mentioned 327 spaces, nights and weekends in the Galleria. Do we have any sense of how fully utilized those are at those periods of time?
Commissioner Ertel, I don't have recent data on how occupied those spaces are.
Okay, not to pick at your words, do you have old data? You said you don't have anything recent, but do you have anything at all?
From 2015, we do have the Walker parking study that did assess parking in this area of the city. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't recall what the occupancy numbers that they identified in 2015 in the Galleria garage, but in the meantime, I might be able to look up some of that information.
If you could, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clough. You've definitely served your time up there well. We appreciate it. Now for the applicant to present, if you could please say your name and address.
Good evening, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Omar Abdallah. I'm an attorney at Rose Law Group, 7144 East Stetson Drive here in Scottsdale. And I'm here on behalf of my clients, Wags Capital. Really excited to present this proposal to you for a new and exciting restaurant concept called Swags, a social eatery. You know, in the past, you've probably seen a lot of proposals for complicated projects or controversial projects like mega developments or apartment complexes or wild bars that require CUPs. I'm happy to say, and frankly, I'm very relieved to be here before you and to present this project, which we really feel is just a simple and beautiful restaurant. We're not proposing a bar with a CUP or any kind of crazy development. It's just a new bar. And better yet, this proposal is for a restaurant that will be a really popular restaurant. And so as you can see here, the site that we're working on is on the southwest corner of Schumann and Wells Fargo Avenue. We're right in the entertainment district of downtown. And what we currently see here is an old and somewhat dilapidated, rundown building where the Three Wiseman Bar previously operated. It was constructed here. It's an infill site. It was constructed almost 4 decades ago. And you can see that it's somewhat dated, and it's not really keeping up with the style of the new developments that are coming into this developing area. And so in place of this old bar, Wags Capital is proposing a new high-end dining experience called Swags, a social eatery. And you can kind of see that the architecture here really serves, it's contemporary, and it really serves to improve the appeal from the streetscape. A bit about Wags Capital, and I do have the Wags Capital team here today, but a bit about the Wags Capital team. Wags Capital is owned by Scottsdale resident Aaron Wagner, and they operate over 100 restaurants nationwide. Aaron and his team, they specialize in finding vibrant areas that desperately need some kind of revitalization, redevelopment, and they bring these unique and creatively designed restaurant concepts to life here to help revitalize these areas. These are just a sample of some of their restaurant concepts. Some are in Arizona, but also around the country, in Utah and in Las Vegas. So you might recognize some of these names. Now, what Wags does not do is they do not operate any bars. They're in the restaurant business, so we're not proposing a bar here. And so the Swags Social Eatery will be Wags Capital's first restaurant in Scottsdale. Again, it's not a bar, and I say that a few times because we heard some opposition early on, and it seems like every time we heard the opposition, it was just because they thought it was a bar. And when we explained that it was actually a restaurant use, and they understood that it was a restaurant, they quickly calmed down, and everyone's excited about it. And so after all, I mean, what city wouldn't want to see a new and exciting restaurant concept in their downtown, especially in an entertainment area? And so, of course, parking is a hot button issue here, but fortunately, this restaurant is in a highly walkable location. So you'll see that nearby we have a lot of hotels, apartments, condos. A lot of people live and work in this area. And so we expect that most patrons of the restaurant will just walk over. And those that aren't walking over, we expect will get there by rideshare. We also have a lot of offices in the area. And as you know, offices work off of daytime hours, while the bars and the nightclubs in the area work on nighttime hours, so there's not a lot of overlap there in busyness. And so as Mr. Clough mentioned earlier, the restaurant does need, as a use, does need 30.5 parking spaces. The site itself does have 8 reserved parking spaces, which you can see here in the garage next door. And, in addition to these parking spaces, there's an additional 18.5 spaces in the form of P3 parking credits. Just like the Maya Hotel and basically all developments in the area that rely on parking credits, we have 18.5 parking credits here. And so the remaining 4 parking spaces that get us up to the 30.5 spaces needed are being requested as in lieu parking spaces. And those 4 parking spaces can be approved administratively by your staff because they're less than 5. And so in an area with a lot of bars and nice nightclubs, Swags is a unique high-end restaurant which provides a new restaurant option for residents and guests and visitors in the area. And so the restaurant use, I think it's important to mention, is already permitted under the current zoning. All that we're doing here is we're adjusting some of the development standards to help implement the high-quality urban design that's proposed here, also so that this project as presented can be viable. And so rather than proposing, just another bar, this restaurant option supports the city's desire to create a vital and vibrant and desirable entertainment setting with a diversity of experiences for Scottsdale residents and for visitors to the city of Scottsdale. And so just to help, describe our commitment to this not being a bar, as I mentioned, the ownership group does not operate any bars nationwide. The liquor license involved here is a Series 12 restaurant liquor license. A bar would require a conditional use permit. We're not proposing a CUP. And of course, we're agreeing to aggressive noise reduction stipulations, which I will talk about shortly. And so, the first noise stipulation that we've agreed to is essentially that in addition to the city's noise ordinance, we cannot exceed 68 decibels when measured from the ends of the adjacent streets. And so 68 decibels really isn't all that loud. It's kind of like a conversation, a normal conversation. And so swags really is not going to be that loud at all. The second noise stipulation says that any external speakers would need to face downwards and towards the interior of the establishment. So certainly this restaurant will be a quiet user among much louder neighbors in the vicinity. One thing that I want to clarify, Swags is intending to have speakers on the rooftop, just like any typical restaurant would want to have music playing for its restaurant guests so that they're not eating in awkward silence. So the speakers are intended, but the speakers would be following these stipulations so that they would not exceed the 68 decibel requirement. And of course, the speakers would be facing inwards and pointing down. And so, Swags has made a substantial investment in this property, in this planning process. And so, turning this into a bar would be a huge risk for them. And of course, that is not the intention here. This is a restaurant. There are numerous benefits to the city of Scottsdale of bringing this kind of use here. What's proposed is a beautiful building that's clearly an upgrade to, one of the ugliest sites maybe in the area. It'll provide a much needed fine dining option on the east side of Scottsdale Road in downtown. It'll bring with it roughly 200 jobs. The building height that's proposed is much lower than what is allowed. The zoning permits up to 84 feet, but Swags will be just 3 stories, 58.6 feet, and that includes the rooftop terrace. The proposal includes widening the sidewalks from the existing 6-foot condition to 10 feet in key areas. You can see that illustrated here. A drop-off and pickup loading area is provided. And you can see the new bulb out to define the drop-off and loading area and the street parking along Schumann and North Wells Fargo. And the new daytime lunch option will activate the area. As you know, south of the site along Stetson, there are a lot of studios and offices, businesses over there. This will provide a lunch option for people that want to walk over with their teams and have lunch in the area. The new structure would provide physical shading over the public walkways, and it helps stop the growth of bars in the area by providing a new upscale building that's certain to influence future developments in this area in a positive light. And so we weren't aware of any opposition, but we did, after we received a letter from the Maya, we did decide to spend an hour or two walking the area. We talked to businesses, people that work in the area, and we found that there was a lot of support for the proposal. Everyone's really excited about a new restaurant coming to town and taking place of this old bar. And of course, we also did have a neighborhood meeting, and the neighborhood meeting went very positively. So people in the area are very excited for this new proposal. And that concludes my presentation. I hope you're as excited for this project as we are, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Abdallah. I'll kick it off with a question. I'm still trying to understand getting bodies there to and from. That is such a congested area, and heaven forbid you try to wait for a ride share to pick you up or drop you off. But I mean, I've waited an hour before and just walked like 5 blocks away and just got another one. It's ridiculous. So I'm curious, you mentioned the drop-off, pickup, loading area. Is that for humans or items, or where do you plan to have like an ideal spot for ride share? And has there been consideration around valet parking, and if so, where that would be based?
So the loading area is a traditional loading area in the daytime when the restaurant's closed. When the restaurant's open, it can be used for valet if WAGS decides in the future that that would be necessary. That's definitely an option. It's definitely a busy area. We all know that. With me today is Paul Basha, a traffic engineer with Summit Land. I think he can maybe talk a little bit about the traffic situation and what we're thinking there.
Yeah, could you pull that slide up again that shows the drop-off loading area, if you don't mind? Uh-oh. Do you have to go through all of them? It's probably towards the end.
I think so. Is this what you're looking for?
I think you have another one that actually, I mean, it's within that map. There you go. I think that's
Okay.
the spot.
Paul, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, Mr. Basha. It's still a little tricky getting down there, but it's better than the other end where Bottle Blonde and all the others are.
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission, Chair Higgs and Vice Chair Young. My name is Paul Bash. As Omar said, I'm a consulting traffic engineer. And we did the traffic statement, which included a few pages on parking. And as Omar has explained, the green areas are existing parking spaces on Schuman Lane and a loading, unloading zone on Wells Fargo Avenue. As Omar explained, the loading, unload is for food products and supplies and such during the day, and could be used for valet or ride share during the hours of dinner and into the evening and late night. Chair Higgs, you mentioned ride share is difficult. Yes, I'm well aware of that. I spent a fair bit of time when I was with the city, with Scottsdale Police, walking the entertainment district during Friday and Saturday evenings in particular. And as part of those visits, when I was transportation director with the police, there is now ride-share routing signs in this vicinity. I happen to live just half a mile north, so I see those ride-share signs very frequently. And they direct ride-sharing to south of the entertainment district, and there are multiple locations where people can wait for their ride share or be dropped off from their ride share. My understanding is it's made a great difference for reducing traffic congestion in this little U-shaped entertainment district. Chair Higgs, I hope that I've spoken to your question.
That's helpful. I guess it's been a little while since I've been there during peak times and seen the signage, so it's probably too old then. I'm definitely too old now to be around there, but maybe once Swags is here, it'll be different if they're here. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. Mr. Basha, so you did the traffic study in this. Can you tell me where the employees are going to park and how many employees did you anticipate upon this application?
Chair Higgs and Commissioner Gonzalez, it was a traffic statement, not a traffic study, and we did not do an exhaustive parking study either because one was not required. But the available parking spaces just to the south across the alley are there for potentially employee use. There are also large parking areas to the south, just south of Stetson, bordering Wells Fargo, and those spaces could also be used by employees for parking. There are a number of on-street parking spaces in the vicinity on several of the other streets that do not have bars or restaurants or nightclubs, but are office buildings. And those on-street parking spaces are used during the day for the office employees and could be used for the SWAG's employees during the evening hours.
Do you have any other agreements, or do you know of SWAGs having any agreements for their employee parking at maybe the gallery or something like that? Some reserved parking for their employees?
Commissioner Gonzalez, I'm not aware of any such agreements.
Okay. Do you know how many employees are they thinking about having on this property?
As the slide shows, they anticipate 200 employees. They would not be there all at the same time,
Sure.
obviously. But perhaps someone, please. Commissioner Gonzalez, Aaron Wagner, the owner and operator of the restaurant, has said there will be a maximum of 30 employees at any one time.
Okay, and then I guess then did you have any specific items as far as where they're going to use this semicircle also for their food drops and everything during the day? Are there time periods when you're going to allow drop-offs and stuff? You're not going to be able to, are you going to avoid the noon time rush, maybe have drop-offs around 6, 7 o'clock for foodstuffs? Right.
Just to answer that question, introduce yourself. Aaron Wagner, Wags Capital. What's typical in the industry is your national food distributors will typically deliver really late at night or early in the morning. With this concept, it'll be always early in the morning. And that's set up that way, but for all intents and purposes, the functionality of the delivery of food service will probably be a semi-truck down here toward the back of the building, where they'll just wheel it in off their docks into the back of the house because the kitchen back doors are there.
Yeah, that's my understanding as far as the usage for that level of service type of property.
That space really will be mostly just public use because early in the morning, they'll just wheel it in the back.
For fire, what are you going to do as far as occupancy?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that our team has worked, in the design.
Whoever can answer that, I'd like to know that answer if you have it now.
I don't know. Do we have that?
The occupancy?
Hi, David Folk with Collier Architects. And can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
The occupancy, do you think is what you're going to bring forward to as far as a fire permit occupancy?
Oh, boy, good question. I believe per floor we were in the 25 to 30 range based on the per square foot requirements for dining.
Okay.
The kitchen would be even less. I believe that was like in the 15 occupants.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Thank you. That concludes my
Can
question.
I follow up on that?
Commissioner Ertel?
Did I understand you to say there was 30 per floor?
That's what's based on just using the city's square footage requirements with the code. Doesn't mean we actually place 30 people on there based on the table size and chair arrangement, but just that's what the open square footage would allow, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Scarborough?
Thank you, Chair Higgs. I'd like to follow up on that too. If I'm looking at the floor plates, and I keep hearing this is not a bar, but it looks like the floor plates have a bar indicated on each level, and now I'm hearing that it's 25 to 30 people per floor that can be on the space. So I'm just curious, if this is a restaurant concept and not a bar, and maybe I'm misreading the floor plates, but why would there need to be 3 bars for 90 people?
Chair Higgs and Commissioner Scarborough, the bars that you see on each of the floors is just like a lot of restaurant concepts where you would see a bar for bar dining, but also for, serving alcohol. It doesn't necessarily make it a bar in the traditional sense that also is evidenced by the liquor license that's needed. Maybe if Aaron or if you wanted to also comment on that, okay.
Yeah, I can speak to it. There's a couple good reasons. One, I just do want to make it, I don't know exactly what the ratios are, but I don't believe that's accurate. When you're talking about 30 people per, this restaurant, based on typical square footage, take out the kitchen, restrooms, you're probably close to 250 seats in this restaurant. I would say about that. So I just want to make sure that there's not expectations of like 90 people in this building. I hope that we can fill the building and everybody will be sitting down and we'll have our seats full. Otherwise, I'm not going to make money on this. So, second, to answer your question, why would we have bars on all 3 levels? First, for practical reasons, you've got stairs and elevators. So if you want to order your drink, you go out with your wife, you expect to have your drink within 3 minutes, 4 minutes. That's pretty standard. If I got to go to the bottom floor and then run it upstairs for practical reasons, spilling drinks, people, all that kind of stuff doesn't work. So it's very common that always a tiered restaurant of any sort has wells and bars set up on each floor to be able to make those drinks. And that includes, easy stuff, just pouring a beer and mocktails and your sodas and all that kind of stuff. The second reason is when you design a nice restaurant, one of the most social aspects of the restaurant, and as you can tell, it's called a social eatery, is that people love to sit at the bar. They love to mingle at the bar. They love to talk, in between waiting for a table. And so one of the aesthetics and the practical uses is to design your dining area around a bar. And so that's really typical of almost every nice restaurant, high-end, full-service, sit-down restaurant, is people design where their bar's at, they design their seating, and their dining around it. And if you looked at any of high-end Fox Concepts or the Maestro guys or Dominic's, they've done the exact same thing. Does that answer your question?
Oh, it does.
Cool, thanks.
Vice Chair Young?
Yeah, I guess I just want to follow up on that. So if there's 250 guests that you would have at the restaurant and you've got 30 employees, we're at 280 total people, which I assume, say, they pair up and half of them drive. So that's 140 spaces that would be required to service this restaurant. And I'm just kind of using numbers that we're given tonight.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
Aaron Wagner, Wags Capital. If you used that logic, then there's not one restaurant, bar, or anything in this area that would ever be parked, right? So, we just, outside of just the practical application of the fact that this is the entertainment district and most people are not driving and parking here, and it just take one visit here on Friday night to find that out, you'd see that people are ride sharing here, they're parking away, they're walking to the, from parking somewhere else, getting dropped off. It's really standard. So even in our non-entertainment district like fine dinings, that's just not the case. Most of the time, if you're gonna be a full house, you're not gonna be tabletops of 2 to 250. We found that even in like, our latest opening is a high-end Mexican restaurant similar to like a Toca Madera. We just opened in Riverton, Utah. It's 220 tops. I would say on a typical Friday or Saturday night that more than 40% of our tables are filled with 6 tops or more. Large parties that have come there together, celebrate a birthday, anniversary, work thing, after hours, whatever the case may be. And so you really actually don't have ever 140 vehicles coming to even just and this is at like a shopping super center where nothing else is even open that late. And so here you've got essentially 3 massive hotels right across the street. None of those people have cars. They've all come in. If they do, they're parked at the hotel. You've got office buildings that we're serving lunch and brunch for every single day. So I would think that that line of logic, although might apply in other places, won't be the case here.
Okay. I just asked the question. My own office is a block from here.
Awesome.
And so I hope, if this works out, I come have lunch or dinner at your restaurant, but I also do know how busy it is.
Yeah.
On the weekends.
Absolutely.
And it's nuts.
That's why we paid a lot of money for the site.
Yeah.
We hope.
There's a lot of people.
I hope I can fill the tables, but
Yeah.
we look forward to serving you.
So, I mean, I do have some sensitivities to that because as it is, without another user, I mean, it's very congested.
Absolutely. Anything else for me?
I'm going to check with Commissioner Serena, who's on the phone.
Yeah, I do have some questions, but it feels like there's some public comment. Is that correct? I might have missed that. If there's no public comment,
Yes. We have
Yeah, I'll wait till after that.
2 requests for public comment. Would you like to wait until
Great.
after?
Yeah, I'll wait and see what those questions or those comments are.
Okay. Great. Mr. Wagner, I think we're good for now. So with that, Mr. Abdallah, if it's okay, we'll move to the request to speak. Sure. We have technically 3 cards to request to speak, because one is donating their time. Victoria, I'm going to mangle your last name, Waronick, is wishing to donate her time to Mr. Tim Lasota. So, Mr. Tim Lasota, you have 4 minutes total. If you can please say your name and address. You have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Timothy Lasota, 2198 East Calmac Road in Phoenix. I'm here on behalf of Maya Hotel, which is that building under construction there in the background. In the foreground is the site, the applicant's site. So I am here on behalf of Maya Hotel. One of the comments earlier was, well, this will be nice and new, and we'd love to support something nice and new here. It's unfortunate, but I am here in opposition to this project. One of the things I'll get into is the outreach we did to this applicant, which, well, it's football season, and we definitely got the Heisman. The response we got, I thought, was very poor. And the issue for us is we're building this hotel, and the rooms are going to face south by design, or at least a lot of them will, the suites, and we're going to have this whatever you want to call it. A lot of discussion, is it a bar, is it a restaurant? It looks like a bar to me. I mean, I guess they're saying it's a restaurant because it's a Series 12, but there's plenty of Series 12 that make a lot of noise, and that is our big concern. So I think the fact that it's a Series 12 isn't really that important. What we told the applicant is, we don't want outdoor speakers, and that's our big deal. There are some stipulations in here that do talk about that. We think they're simply inadequate, and that was what I sent. I sent my letter to, let's see if I can get it up there. I sent my letter to the applicant, and that's exactly what I said, is look, our big deal is the speakers. Now, we heard earlier from the applicant that they did some outreach, and they went around, and it sounds like maybe they circulated a petition to people, that 18 people signed this petition. Well, I mean, I think maybe they should have responded to us. I got about a 5-sentence email on this thing saying, don't worry, we've got everything handled. And one of those sentences was, I hope you're doing well. So I think that in terms of the engagement by this applicant, I think it is disappointing because we made an honest and a good faith effort, and we would love to support a nice project. But we have a hotel, and at the heart of the zoning case are the efforts essentially to diminish the setbacks and to diminish the stepbacks, which is very important to us when you consider how close we are. Just across the street, you can also see it. I'd point to us if my pointer were working, but you see the site, and you can see the Maya is under construction just to the up and to the left of it. So, I mean, we're right there. I know you get a lot of applicants who come in and they're not close. They don't necessarily have much of an interest. They're all freaked out. I mean, this is right there. Our guests are going to be looking at this and we think hearing it with the inadequate stipulations. I think someone made a really good comment about the 68 decibels. It's a blunt instrument. Enforcement is difficult. Let's get ahead of this ahead of time. and not have something down the road where we're saying, where's the noise coming from? Is it coming from here? Is it coming from there? I do want to talk about the the parking. The staff report says 860 daily trips. Comment in the presentation, well, a lot of these people are just going to walk over. Well, they're going to walk over from somewhere. Rideshare is pointed to, but those cars aren't just going to go away after they've dropped people off. I mean, our point is, I thought, provided some constructive comments, invited a dialogue that we're disappointed it wasn't engaged in, and as a result, we're here in opposition. Also, I do want to mention, I don't think DRB is really an answer. I know there's a comment about that. I mean, it seems to be kind of an approve now, and we'll settle things out in DRB. I mean, lots of good questions from this commission earlier. We have the same questions, and one of the big ones was the speakers and the parking. So I thank you for your attention tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Lasota. We do have, do you have a question for, sure. So if you could hang on there for just a moment, Mr. Lasota, we have Commissioner Kaminsky has a question.
Thank you. I did have a couple questions. With your project that's under construction, did you get a setback reduction? And if so, what is it on your site?
Let me defer. You, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that. But I would say I think that a lot of zoning questions are about accountability, and so compatibility. So I don't know if we got one, but I think that we have designed this to kind of accommodate or to sort of to be compatible with some of the noise challenges in the neighborhood.
That is one of the things, the parity of compatibility and in treating each property equally. Thank you. The other question I had was, if they were to reorient the upper floor with the restrooms on the north side, so there was a physical barrier between your property and theirs, would that alleviate your concerns?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kaminsky, I think that would be an improvement. I don't think that in itself would eliminate our concerns. I think we spelled it out. I think one of the commissioners actually asked, well, why not just not have the outdoor speakers? And that's our question. That would clearly be an improvement. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of that, but I wouldn't say it would eliminate all of our concerns.
Question for the speaker. Yeah. Commissioner Scarborough has a question for you now.
Thank you, Chair Higgs. Mr. Lasota, I'm about to ask a couple of questions, and I hope you don't take them the wrong way, but for parking for the Maya, if memory serves, that project was also looking for a parking variance or a deviation standards and used rideshare as an example. So just out of curiosity, do you recall what the parking requirements were that the Maya was held to when it went through zoning?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Scarborough, I don't know exactly, but one of the things I know is that the W Hotel is significantly overparked. And I think that was one of the considerations that went into what was required of the Maya. Mm-hmm. I mean, here, I didn't even get a chance to mention, I mean, they said there's 30 spaces, but they're really, I mean, only 8 of these spaces actually really exist as like an actual parking space that is a parking space. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. If memory serves, and I think there were other people on the commission or DRB when the Maya went through, but I do believe that even the Maya asked for help on parking in terms of what they were providing on site. The other one is, does the Maya have any outdoor speakers itself?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Scarborough, we don't have anything yet. I don't know if we plan to have outdoor speakers or not.
I'd be curious if nobody on your team knows that answer. That's something I'd be curious of. I just want to understand, you know, if we're trying to be considerate of the neighbors and what is consistent in the area, I just want to make sure that we truly are doing that. So thank you.
Commissioner Serena, did you have anything for Mr. Lasota, or should we move to the next speaker?
Yeah, I do. I think a couple of questions have already been asked. One of the questions I have is, I think they're around the corner. Again, I know that the owner of the Maya owns a lot of the real estate down there. Am I wrong? Is my memory failing? Was there another restaurant similar, at least conceptually to me, that was presented as a restaurant that was going to be owned and operated by the same ownership group that owns the Maya? I can't remember if it was the one facing Camelback in those old office buildings, or one kind of the one property inside of Camelback Road, just south.
Madam Chair, I think you might be talking about Calle Rosa.
Is that a restaurant part of the ownership group that owns Maya that was recently proposed? Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Is that a restaurant that was recently taken through this process that's owned by the same ownership group that owns the Maya?
Madam Chair, I believe the answer is yes.
Okay, and I think that was a 3-story. Do you know what series liquor license they have as well?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I believe it's a Series 12.
Okay, and if I remember right, were there rooftop speakers on that building? I think, if I remember, I'm going off memory, maybe someone from staff, or I think someone from the Maya ownership group is probably in the audience that can confirm it. But that was a 3-story building with some version of a rooftop restaurant as well, correct?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I don't know. I didn't have anything to do with that project. I will tell you that one of the requirements of that project is that we essentially devote almost an entire floor to parking. So that much I do know about the project, which was one of the reasons we were a little bit concerned about the attention that's been paid to parking here.
Yeah, and so back to my question on the speakers or the sound. I know there were a couple of recent applications that were very similar to this, so forgive me if I don't remember exactly which one your ownership group had, but maybe you can look to somebody in the audience that works on your team. But it was the property directly on Camelback, correct, facing the residential neighborhood to the north?
Well, Madam Chair, members of the commission, I'm not sure I heard the question, but I mean, that is the bottom line for us, is that there are, we've designed this hotel essentially so that we would face sort of, we thought, the most advantageous area.
Mr. Lasota, I'm sorry, and again, my apologies for not being there in person. If you can't understand me, I'll try to be a little clearer and slow it down a little bit. I'm referring to the restaurant that your ownership group brought through this process, and it was a 3-story restaurant with a rooftop deck facing the neighbors to the north of Camelback Road, the residential community. That was the same ownership group that owns the Maya, correct? With the rooftop deck facing north towards the residential neighbors?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I believe that is the same ownership group.
Okay, and were there speakers on the roof of that restaurant that was proposed and approved?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I don't know. I know very little about that project.
Okay, can you look to one of your team members? I am watching on the TV, and I think somebody that was at that meeting from your ownership groups in the audience, can they confirm that there are speakers on that roof?
Do we have someone that could answer that? Do you have the answer to that, sir? If you do, if you could please state your name and address.
Commissioner Higgs, Planning Commissioners, my name is Boyce O'Brien with Scottsdale Capital. Hello, Commissioner Serena. I hope you're doing well. Yes, it's a different LLC, but essentially the same ownership. We fought long and hard about that. We significantly enclosed a large portion of that patio to mitigate that noise. We also were required to raise the glass up to 6 feet to further mitigate that noise. And we're facing Camelback. We're not in the area down here, right across the street from a brand new hotel. We also have outdoor speakers on the event deck for the hotel, but we also spent an enormous amount of money adding third windows on the east side of the hotel, and none of our
Our rooms face the east side, so we've designed around it. Too late to design for that on the south side. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but
Yeah, no, that was helpful, and thank you for clearing up. I know Mr. Lasota obviously wasn't a part of that project, but thank you. I think when it comes, at least Mr. Lasota, I think your concerns, I think some of them are valid. I think those have been valid concerns from where I sit for quite a long time in that area. That being said, I think the feeling from, the hotel that this restaurant, which matches almost identical to the same application that was presented as a restaurant, a sit-down high-end restaurant with almost identical, floor plan. They could almost have it the same architect, and that the speakers on their rooftop deck are going to make a significant difference when you are building a hotel in the downtown or in the bar district. I think that's, that building that hotel in the bar district was a design element that the developer of the Maya wanted to move forward with, and they had confidence in that because I think that's the scene and the party scene of maybe the audience they attract, similar to the W. So I'm having trouble with matching and drawing parallels to what was proposed by the same ownership group as a restaurant, and told the commission that the speakers on the roof were just for environment or setting the mood for the restaurant, and that now even further into the bar district, entertainment district, really as deep into it as you can go, that this rooftop with the same liquor license is going to have a real negative effect on the guests versus the other bars in the neighborhood. So I'm not saying I'm yes or no on this project. I want to hear the other speakers and other questions, but that's my feeling, at least on some of the initial concerns, Mr. Lasota.
May I respond to that, Madam Chair?
Sure.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I think one of the important things in that is you heard from Mr. O'Brien all the things we did to mitigate how much money we spent. I mean, I did lay out a marker in the letter, but I mean that's what you do, right? You say we want this, and the response was this 5-sentence email that said basically he hopes I'm doing well, and we've taken care of all these things. So I think that is important. I also think that this body needs to consider overall. I mean, sure, I represent someone, I represent an interested party, but I think that the points are nonetheless valid, and I just ask that they be considered in that light as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I will put for staff on that then, Mr. Lasota, I'm happy to take that on because ask the question, because I agree to the point of being fair is when we're standing across Camelback Road, and help me out here, I'm not a noise expert by any stretch. I think when the W's had some noise concerns or some other bars along Camelback, the residents have complained, and my understanding of enforcement, this is directed at staff, is that you can kind of stand across the street and understand where the decibels are. I think the question came up earlier, and maybe someone could expand a little bit on that. If I'm standing at the base of the Maya Hotel, the back end of the old Maya pool place, or anywhere in that square of bars, and the noise is above the 65 or 68 decibels, how do the people doing the enforcement, how do they differentiate between where the noise is coming from? I would imagine it's just a noise bleeding into the streets from almost every storefront in that area. How do you identify that it's Swag's noise that's bleeding into the street, or the W's, or the other bar down the street?
Who is that question directed towards, Mr.? To staff?
That's for staff.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, and Commissioner Serena. So, yeah, the police department works with code enforcement to enforce the noise requirements, and it can get tricky in terms of enforcement. But I think that they've had a lot of experience over the years in terms of understanding where the noise is coming from and using their noise meters to determine if there's a violation or not. And they're getting more sophisticated every day. They've installed noise sensors in the area to help with all of that. So it's a base standard that's being proposed in this set of stipulations that's consistent with what we've been doing more recently, something that the code enforcement and police department have found in terms of a reasonable approach to enforce. And so that's the intent of that stipulation, that it would be enforceable.
Thank you. And one last follow-up, and then I'll let the other speaker, my apologies, is Mr. Curtis, if they were to have any kind of live music, that would require, in addition to this request, correct? They can't bring in live music under this current application?
That's correct, Madam Chair and Commissioner Serena. The question was, if they propose live entertainment, would that require a separate conditional use permit? And that would, and those separate conditional use permit processes go through a very similar as the zoning case with Planning Commission and City Council with the outreach, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Kaminsky, I know you had a question, as well as Commissioner Gonzalez. I just want to make sure you know the other speaker is Mr. Boyce O'Brien, who was answering some of the questions as well. Do you want to wait for him to speak, or do you have it specifically for Mr. Lasota?
Thinking it's for hotel.
Okay, Commissioner Kaminsky.
Just a quick question. As a new constructed project, I'm assuming that your construction type requires you to meet the energy code, which would include enhanced windows that would potentially mitigate some of the noise transmission?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Kaminsky, I want to say we have double-paned windows on our that face east. In terms of, is it south?
South, I would hope. South and west?
Okay. Yeah, it's, I'm sorry, it's south, yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
That was what I was referring to earlier, that one particular project that we had done before, another restaurant that was facing north on Camelback, and it was facing right across the street from a hotel. That was what the other commissioner was referring to. The most important part about the whole situation that I was trying to bring forward is that we all worked together, and that night we were able to bring out these stipulations and get it passed and brought forth. A lot of it is in the design. A lot of it was brought forward in how we mitigated the product by using hard surfaces, making sure that if there were speakers, the speakers would conform, were downward and everything. So I guess the thing that I'm trying to bring forward is that by working with both partnerships, those who oppose and do not oppose the property, I think we worked an easy solution out, and I think this project looks very good. I'm going to support this project, and I encourage everybody to talk to each other. Thank you.
Thank you. I think if it's okay, we'll give Mr. Boyce O'Brien his 3 minutes to speak now.
Commissioner Higgs, Boyce O'Brien, or Planning Commission members. My name is Boyce O'Brien again, 4501 Scottsdale Road. I'll be short. I support this project. It's a great restaurant, but let's be clear. It's woefully underparked, and it's going to have a challenge. There's a big difference between restaurant noise and party noise. And if it's restaurant noise, no harm, no foul. We're not concerned about that. Our concern is with the chaos that ensues on the evenings and weekends. People aren't going to want to drive down here. And the patrons that come down for the party are completely different than the patrons that come down for a five-star restaurant. So our concern is this thing's going to struggle, especially without the parking over time. There's going to be pressure to perform, pressure to make money. When that happens, suddenly liquor sales go up and there's pressure to increase the liquor sales. They're off the beaten path. The big difference between our project on Camelback Road and this project is we've got clear frontage on Camelback Road. It's attracting a different clientele. The only way that this developer can attract business is through signage, but it's on a back road on Schumann, which is kind of the back end of the entertainment district. So either they're going to attract the party through signage, or they're going to attract it by cranking up their music, because that's what they do. So if it's a restaurant, we're in full support. My concern is that it's going to struggle, or if it does struggle, it becomes more of a party, and nobody wants to move that kind of noise south beyond the entertainment district. So I just request for you to consider that and think about that, and the transfer of that party a block south and what that can do moving forward before you take your vote.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Questions?
Commissioner Ertel?
Actually, this is a suggestion that the applicant get to respond to that. I mean, when you get into the idea that, you know, the restaurant is going to fail, not fail, but struggle, I think you said. You know, I have some background in turnaround on restaurants, but I'd like to hear what the applicant, how he would respond to that.
Yep, it is time for the applicant to respond to actually all of the public comment that has been said. Unless you had anything else, Mr. O'Brien?
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
Aaron Wagner, Wags Capital. So in response to Mr. Boyce, one, I appreciate that you're in support of the project. We are 100% a restaurant. I'm a restaurateur. I'm not a nightclub guy. I'm not a nightlife guy. I got 7 young children, married to the same woman 18 years. I have no interest in operating or owning a bar or nightclub or any else that's going on right there. I grossly disagree with our ability to market our product and our restaurant and our location. I think, one, we have a ton of organic traffic. As you guys all know and have talked about, this is a really busy area. And these guys have just built 2 beautiful hotels that I've stayed at the W many times. And anybody and everybody that stays at these hotels is going to see our restaurant there. And there's a ton of business people that come in, they stay at these hotels, they want to have a good lunch, a brunch, they want to have a nice dinner. They're not all 22-year-olds that want to go out and do bottle service all night. They actually want to come and hang out and have a cocktail and have a great meal. So I think we're going to get a lot of patrons organically. Outside of that, I'm also a fairly young restaurateur and business guy. I grew up with marketing being social media, and me personally, my personal brand has millions of followers, and all of my brands have millions of followers, and that's really how we've marketed our brands. And it's kind of a new age deal. I don't know if that's the way that, you know, Scottsdale's groups, and maybe they use a lot of traditional marketing methods, and they got to have frontage and pay the extra $10 million for a hard corner. I don't. I've done really, really well at internet marketing and driving people to our brands through social media if we give people a great experience. And that's really what we are. We're experiential dining. So if people can come in there, they can have great food, they can have a great experience, create memories and experiences with people they care about, they're going to come back, and they're going to talk about it, and they're going to follow our social, and they're going to see all our specials and the stuff we're doing, and that's how we win. So to speak to, you know, our restaurant's hard, absolutely. A lot of moving parts. Our business is hard, absolutely. A lot of moving parts. Our hotel is struggling like crazy right now, yeah. I mean, it's one of the hardest sectors right now. But these guys are building a beautiful one across the street. Why? Because it's a prime location. Here's the deal. I came to this country 20 years ago as an immigrant because I wanted the American dream, and that's my risk to take. I paid a lot of money for this land. I'm confident in our brand. I'm confident in our marketing team. But I came here because I believe I can make a business work. And if I fail, that's on me. That's entrepreneurship. That's capitalism. That's what the American dream is. But I'm willing to take that chance, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is too. We're a restaurant. When people talk about these decibel levels, just to give, everybody's kind of wanted to understand decibel levels. Street noise, just cars driving by, that's 75 decibels. That's just cars driving by. We're at 68 decibels. This is what we're stipulating to. If I had any intention to pull the wool over anybody's eyes and have a big party on my rooftop, I sure as hell wouldn't be stipulating to 68 decibels. okay? Secondarily, the group that is in opposition of this, fantastic group. I think they're changing the landscape of Scottsdale, and they've brought a ton of entertainment to this district. But there's a reason they put 3 panes on the west side of their building, because they own a day club right there with speakers that blast into the open air, because people love that stuff. We're across the street. We're on the south end. They have double panes there. We're at 68 decibels operating a beautiful restaurant that's going to be a great addition for their hotel guests. And this is all just a moot point. We're talking about this, but at the end of the day, they're going to come over and they're going to eat there and they're going to love it. And nobody's going to worry about concerns of noise. If anybody's been to this area, I can tell you for all practical purposes, other than maybe like the bikini store that's closed, we will be the least concerned noise in the entire area within 3 blocks. So I just think this is a lot of worry without understanding the real practicality behind stipulations of the decibels, the angle of our speakers. We don't want to do noise out there. We're not competing with the bars. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to give an ambience to our guests so they can have a great experience in the restaurant. It's totally normal, and almost every restaurant in the world has it. It's the reason they're proposing it on their restaurant, where there's a bunch of residents. We've got a 5-story parkade behind us. So, I mean, the writing's on the wall, guys. This is what we are. This is what we intend to do. I look forward to bringing this to this town, because this is a wicked town. And every time I eat here, it doesn't matter if it's a Monday or a Wednesday, you can't even get reservations at most of these restaurants. So I'm excited about this market, and that's what we're looking forward to. Do you have any other questions, Commissioner?
No, thank you.
Cool. Anybody else? Thanks.
Commissioner Serena, did you have anything before Mr. Wagner has a seat?
Nope, sorry, I was trying to hit the mute button off. No, I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Abdallah?
Thank you, Chair Higgs, and thank you, Aaron. You should see the Instagram folder I have and the messages between my wife and I. Basically, every new restaurant we go to, we found on Instagram, and we send to each other, so it's true. I want to address some of Mr. Lasota and Maya's comments. We appreciate those comments. We did respond to them, and maybe our response was brief, but that's because we think all of those concerns are addressed. So, we're kind of surprised to hear them, but this really is not a quiet area. It's the entertainment district of Scottsdale, right? And so, if the Maya was truly concerned about noise that their guests would hear, then the hotel probably wouldn't be right there in the middle of the entertainment district, right next to a nightclub. And so, their guests really aren't coming to stay there or to stay in this area because they're looking for quiet. Really, they're coming to stay there because they want to be right in the middle of the action, right? And so, we agreed to noise stipulations that typically only apply to bars, and so we'll be the only restaurant that's having to, stipulate to these noise stipulations, and that's a pretty big deal. If we weren't to have speakers on the rooftop, then we'd be the only restaurant in town that just can't have music, and that's kind of crazy. And so, the stipulations, they already address noise, and, of course, we'll work with the DRB on the design elements and on the design. We can't do that now because that's for the DRB process, and so that's when we'll incorporate, those details, and we'll be sure to address all of the city's concerns there. When it comes to parking, the restaurant use is already an allowed use, right? Sure, we're asking for some deviations, but, ultimately we have, some physical parking spaces. We have the P3 parking credits. Really, we're only asking for 4 additional parking spaces, and those can be approved administratively. And so really, it's not a big ask for those parking spaces, especially when we consider what the Maya has asked for their parking. So the Maya doesn't have any parking spaces. All of their parking, their 300, I believe, or so parking, comes from the P3 parking credits. Also, there was a comment on setbacks and, just generally SWAG's asking for deviations from development standards. Yes, we are asking for minor deviations, but so did the Maya. And I have a copy or a page from the council report for the Maya's approval, so I'll just read off a few lines. All required parking for Maya Hotel would be remote. Proposal includes a request to preserve 298 P3 parking credits. No step back proposed for Maya Hotel building. Reduced setbacks also proposed. 20 feet back of curb required, 12 feet proposed. Building setbacks reduced along most street frontages in response to lot size and shapes. So certainly the Maya also asked for a lot of accommodations. That's all I have to share. I mean, I think it's a really great project, as Aaron and the rest of the team explained, and we hope you'll agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abdallah. Are we allowed to have, Mr. Curtis, are we allowed to have a response from?
Madam Chair, you did close public comment, and you did allow the applicant to do the rebuttal.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. O'Brien. No, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to allow you to come up to the podium again. Thank you, though. Commissioner Serena, it looks like we have exhausted our questions in the Kiva here. Do you have anything else?
Nope, I'm fine. Just because I'm remote, I would make a motion, but I'm remote, so I'll let someone there do it.
Okay. With that, would anyone like to make a motion?
I will. You're ready, okay. I move to make a recommendation to City Council for approval of Case 2, ZN 2023, per the staff recommended stipulations based upon the finding that the downtown/downtown multiple use type 3 parking downtown overlay criteria with amended development standards have been met, and the proposed zoning district map amendment is consistent and conforms with the adopted general plan.
Okay, we have Commissioner Kaminsky. Did I miss a question?
It wasn't a question. Are we going to have discussion?
After the second?
After second, okay.
Isn't that right?
Then I'll,
You're the chair.
Then I'll second, if that's the case.
We've
I'll
had so many
second.
different situations. I'm not even sure anymore. I'm looking at Mr. Curtis. So we do have a motion from Commissioner Ertel.
Madam Chair, it doesn't matter if you'd like to deliberate before a second or after.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kaminsky.
So I am in support of the project. I actually just had some comments related to design that hope they can be worked out. I think it's remiss that you are blocking the west views of Sunset. So if it's a high-end restaurant, I would consider that you look at that on the third floor. And I hope those aren't plastic plants along the patio on the street front. So those are my only two design comments to move forward. Other than that, I would be happy to second the motion.
Okay. So we
Discussion?
still have a discussion?
I don't know. I'll just say that, remember, we have the marquee that's approved, and I'm not sure what kind of sunset you're going to get off the west side.
How about
Open
noon?
discussion.
Yes. Are we going to do discussion now, then?
Yeah. I mean, do we still have discussion? You have a motion.
Yeah, we have a motion, we have a second, and don't we do
Right.
discussion now?
If there's any left, are there any discussion points left?
We had a discussion between the motion and the second, but I thought it was going to be after the motion. Anyway, yes, because I got to go through my checklist. I've got to go through my checklist. I look at it, 3 points, amenities. Clearly this is an upscale dining addition to the city. This is a big plus. Pedestrian accommodations, we didn't talk too much about that, but I think that's important. So amenities, the whole thing is a big plus. Aesthetics, when I was reading through the write-up, I was a little worried about postmodern design principles. So I'm glad you had the slide that made that clear. That looked pretty good, I thought. It's shorter than allowed. That's a plus in Scottsdale. Sometimes we like to keep things lower. The setbacks, the setbacks will match the neighbors. Gives it more of an urban look. The step back, that was setbacks, okay, and step back change, that seems minor at least on an absolute basis. Economics, that was my third point. Yesterday, the day before, my concern was traffic. How much traffic is going to be added, and can the streets accommodate that? Okay, it's going to be dense, but it's absolute numbers. It's not going to be a huge increase in traffic. Mr. Basha did the statement, not the study, but the statement. And, I look at those numbers, and they're based on engineering standards. And I always say, okay, but what is the demand from the property? And when one gentleman says, oh, it's going to be 90 people, seating for 90 people, I was a little apprehensive about that. Fortunately, the owner says, nope, 250, which is, from my background, what a fine dining facility would be if it started off with 9,100 square feet. You work through the formulas, which is not real life necessarily, but it's formulas. And so, yeah, that works. And so that's consistent with nearly the maximum amount of traffic that this could generate. But as we have pointed out and agreed, there's going to be a lot of pedestrian traffic. There's going to be ride share, and no, the ride share cars don't stay there. They go someplace else and pick up somebody else. So that works. The other part of economics, of course, is the taxes. The city is going to be making money off of this. It's an aesthetic improvement. Oh, I didn't mention employment, but it's going to provide employment, at least for whoever's working there. Aesthetics, good. Amenities, good. And economics. I'm a little concerned about parking, but they're meeting the requirements, and you can't really hold them to much more than the requirements. And if the problem is going to be theirs. We don't want those 7 children going, starving if you can't find a way to work out parking, and I'll bet that you'll find a way to work out parking. So that was the reason for my support of this proposal.
Vice Chair Young.
Thanks, Chair Higgs. I'll echo some of Commissioner Ortel's sentiments there. I mean, I've got concerns about the parking. I've got concerns about the traffic. I know my commute home at the end of the day has gotten worse in the last 3 years. So it's getting busier, and I think that there's still a lot of people on the road. But again, you have complied, and the city's got processes to account for the parking that you need for the site. And I'm also glad that it's going to be generating jobs. That's a plus. As far as the noise, I think we've kind of beat that horse tonight. The major sound generators, I think, are elsewhere in the entertainment district. And stipulating to something that's an ambient noise elevation of 68 decibels, sometimes I got dual pane windows on the back of my house, and sometimes I don't hear my dog bark. So, it's hard. I certainly want to be sensitive to all the other investment that's been done in the area. But again, it looks like, compared with everything else in the area, it's below what others are doing. So, anyway, I just wanted to say those words.
Thank you. Okay, back to our motions. So we have a motion from Commissioner Ortel and a second from Commissioner Kaminsky. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Higgs,
Yes.
Vice Chair Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaminsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortel,
Yes.
Commissioner Scarborough,
Yes.
Commissioner Serena.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Wonderful. That concludes our Planning Commission meeting for the evening. Could I get a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.